I'm going to get this event kicked off so that we can actually start to have some of these conversations for real. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Sauce here. I'm the Faculty Associate Director for Teaching and Learning Center. You found our way to our professional development series. And as we do every week, we're going to begin with a land acknowledgement.
All right, Don, give me a thumbs up whenever you see what I want you to see. Okay, cool. Here we go. Maybe.
There must be a lot of people using the internet right now.
You know, mine's acting especially slow. Oh, here we go.
As the first land-grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilize the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
These truths,
because we still remember.
Thank you. Our professional development series meets in real time on Wednesdays at noon over Zoom. And if you found us here in real time, you know that. We also archive our events on our webpage for asynchronous viewing. So if you say, oh my goodness, I had no idea Wakonse existed and it is amazing, and you want your colleagues to see this, well, they can look at this probably in a couple hours after this event when it's posted on our webpage. So please let your colleagues know that. You can also earn a professional development certificate either as a faculty member, a staff member, or as a graduate teaching assistant. We have those opportunities. You can also potentially be selected as a TLC fellow, and we have the information for those kind of things in the chat right now. My colleague Ashley Shifter has dropped that in there. We have lots of events over the course of the academic year. Next week, Colby Morberg is going to be talking about open education resources. We're very excited about that event coming up. And today I'm super excited because we have some colleagues talking about the Wakonse Conference on Inspiring College Teaching. And this is a conference that I've been to, so I'm sure I'll chime in here and there. But I want to hand it over to Rick, Beth, and Suzanne, and Steve as well, to kind of get us started. So the floor is yours, and I'm very excited to hear about your experiences. Oh, I do want to add, my colleagues are going to drop also into the chat that we have a scholarship. So if you're like, how do I get to that thing? We actually have a scholarship to help pay for some of the costs if you're looking to do this potentially this semester. So we'll drop that information for you in the chat as well. But now I'm really going to shut up and our panel can start talking about Wakonse. So thank you so all for being here.
Thanks for having us. So we're just gonna have what we thought we would call a little campfire chat today about Wakonse, and Rick is going to share with us a little bit about the history of Wakonse and how it came to K-State and some of those things. And then we'll spend some time, each of us kind of sharing some of our big takeaways and like reasons that we think that you would enjoy Wakonse as well. So, Rick?
I am set. Did that work?
Yeah.
I am sending a GIF in the chat for everyone to see a few small pictures of Wakonse so you can get an idea of what it looks like. Can you let me know if that's sent?
It hasn't come through yet.
Oh, there we go. Bear with it. Oh, Okay, that'll work. So Wakonse was started in 1989, and it's like one of those superhero things where there's multiple origin stories depending on who you ask. But the one that struck me the most is back when I went in 2008, the story goes that there was these 4 people organizing a summer camp basically for high school freshmen, seniors, not high school seniors and college freshmen. And they ended up having amongst themselves this amazing conversation about teaching, only to get home and realize that they actually lived close together. And the comment was, "You mean I had to travel hundreds of miles to have this conversation?" And yes, you did. There really is value in taking the faculty out of their home environment and putting them in this summer camp environment, which is why I wanted to share the environment with you right away. So that's one origin story. The other origin story was that they were organizing this camp. The reason they were organizing a camp was it was a national leadership conference for these students, and they said to themselves, "Well, why can't we do something like this for faculty?" So somewhere between that's how Wakonse came to be. And for years at K-State, Steve Stockham was the guy I learned who taught me about Wakonse in 2008, organizing trips to Wakonse. And yeah, so this past May, how many of us? Four from Salina, 2 from Manhattan, went to Wakonse. And yeah, we want to tell you all about it because there's a spirit there that really you need to feel, you need to experience. Where do I go from there? Yeah, one of the things the Wakonse founders said is, this is not going to be a traditional conference. This is more of an unconference. They don't rely on paying tens of thousands of dollars to bring in guest speakers. They figure that if you get a bunch of people together who are used to inspiring students, then guess what? They can inspire each other. And the summer camp atmosphere just really helps. Like I was telling the gang here, it is after the crowd has seen you try to push a canoe and slip and fall on your butt, it's real hard not to be brutally honest when you have these conversations about teaching later on. Falling on your butt was very graceful, by the way. I do want to have the opportunity for people to ask questions in the chat. So when would be a good time to do a waterfall?
Maybe what if we think about, so you just said that this is like an unconference, right? So what are some things like when you go to conferences, what are some things that like you wish you had more time to do when you're at conferences with your colleagues? So you can think about that, and if you'll drop put that in the chat, but don't hit enter yet. And we'll do a little waterfall and just see kind of like when we go to conferences, why do we go? What are you hoping to get out of it? But also like, what do you not necessarily get that you wish you did? So think about that. And
yeah,
then
I remember as a lowly grad student going to professional conferences, and as that young graduate student, it's like, I got to see this, I got to see this, I got to go attend this. And meanwhile, I'm watching the older professors just kind of not ditch the conference, but kind of head off and go socialize with each other. And the conversations they were having, I have come to realize that's more important than any of those talks I was attending. So if you could take, if you could take that most valuable part of those conferences, that's what Wakonse is.
Yeah. So if you guys want to hit enter, this is kind of like a little waterfall. So if you have your thoughts in and hit enter, we can kind of see, yep, time to digest what you've learned, just time to talk and process, talk creatively about ideas. after an inspirational session. I love that. Tend to gain a lot through talks, but struggle with networking. More time connecting and sharing our experiences, talking with others. So, okay. So, oh, and time for reflection. Okay. So everything that you guys have just put in here, like this is what they were thinking about when they created Wakonse and when they have formed, what they've created for the Wakonse conference, right? And so, like Rick just said, like that time that you spend talking with others is so valuable, right? And so Wakonse is a Lakota word that means to teach and to inspire. And so when I first saw a little blurb from the TLC about this conference, I was like, what is this? What is this Wakonse conference on T? Like, what is this? And so I did a little digging and I researched the website, and I just really fell in love with this idea that it's really about inspiring, about teaching, and what we're doing and how we're doing that and how we can inspire others. And so if you kind of take these ideas that you've just put in this chat, right? Like all this time for reflection, time to network, new ideas for teaching. I love this play-based learning. Oh my gosh, that is like everything that you guys have just said. Like that is Wakonse. So it is set on the beautiful Lake Michigan. And it is like summer camp for adults. And I was just telling Dawn at the very beginning, like when I hopped on here, like I feel like this TLC group is like a whole nother little family that I have here at K-State. And unfortunately I've had some new classes that have been added, and I teach during this time often. And so I'm not here as much and I miss it. Well, I kind of felt like Wakonse became like that TLC community, but like in what they're calling, a conference setting and during the summer. And so it really is, it's like summer camp. You are in little cabin. Well, they're not very little because there's multiple rooms and cabins that you stay in. I got to bunk with Suzanne, which was amazing because we got to spend time getting to know each other on a level that we don't get here at work. Even though we work together, we know each other, we were great friends, but it really helped to deepen our connection and our relationship with each other. Obviously we met Rick and Steven and the other two that joined, right? And I hadn't met anybody who taught at the Salina campus at that point, right? And so we had to go, like Rick said, hundreds of miles away, right, to meet people who are an hour away from us normally. But the neat thing about this, as he said, is they don't bring, they don't pay for big major speakers to come in. Everything is done with the people who are there. You become the presenters through the dialogue and the share sessions that you have there at the conference. So that time to really talk with others about your teaching, that's what this is all about. They will, like when you apply for it, they ask you these questions like, what could you present on? Like, what do you have expertise in, or what are you knowledgeable about, right? And so in my mind, going into this, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to present on this and blah, blah. And I was all worried, just like, that was our level of thinking about presentations before. And so I was panicked when I got there because guess what? There's not a lot of internet accessibility or cell service there. And I was panicking because I had everything in Google Slides and Google folders and all of this. And I was like, how am I going to get my presentation? Like, what am I going to do? And what about this handout that I was supposed to have? And, and like, I was thinking about all the ways that we think about like a conference normally, right? And so take all of that away and think about going into exactly what you said you wish you had at conferences, right? Or that you want more of. And that's what you've got at Wakonse. They have a beautiful schedule created during the day where there are times for you to have small group discussions with what they call a dialogue group that meets regularly throughout the conference. So you get to know other people. And you can become vulnerable with them. You learn more about them and what they teach. And then there are times when you're in these conference sessions and breakout sessions or something like that, I think they call them, where a couple of people have been paired up based on the topics that they said they could present on or their expertise, and they share what they do in teaching. And that's actually, Stephen and I got to know each other very well in that way. So like you get there and they've put all of this together, and you have to kind of go find these people that you've been paired up with, right? I didn't know Stephen. And this is Stephen, yep, right there. And he and I sat down and we're like, okay, well, so my topic was on like cultivating camaraderie and relationships with students, and he was going to talk a little bit about, you know, how he like works with students and student community. So we had to find like this common ground in what we were sharing. And ultimately then together we talked about like, well, okay, these are things that we could share with others who come in to our session. And it was just really a neat, at first it was frustrating, I'm not gonna lie, right? Because like, again, I was thinking about the way that we perceive conferences.
Well,
And so, you know, we walked away with just some really great ideas from other people and ways to think about what we were doing and what they were doing and how we could apply it to us. And I know Stephen has like I don't know, I'm going to let him talk a little bit about our little presentation, because he had it was an eye-opening experience for him too. So I'll be quiet for a minute.
I learned so much working with Beth. I learned that she's very organized and she likes to have everything in line. And I learned that I am good with just rough outlines of stuff. And I was trying not to take away from anything she did. And I just wanted to be careful, because whenever you team present, you don't want to be overbearing to the other people that are presenting. And we as teachers are forceful sometimes, and I don't want to be that. I was meeting all these strange new people, and that was one of the most important things about Wakonse, is when you get there, you meet so many different people that have so many different approaches to teaching and so many different ideas, and they put you in all these chaotic situations. There was the rope course, there was dinner, and they basically discourage you from meeting with your first groups. They bust you up. It's like, and then as you dine with different people that are similar to you, we're all teachers. We all have that passion of wanting to see students succeed. And we all have this. I mean, every one of the people there, okay, there were some grad students, but for the most part, all the people that were there were absolutely veteran, passionate teachers. And as you start discussing your different problems at lunch and the discussion groups and all the different places, you're starting to say, hey, yeah, I've got something like that. And other times you're like, oh, and this is how I solve that problem. And they get 10 different solutions. And I'm not saying our solutions will work in their scenario. We're not in their scenario. But as we went through, we started discovering trends of what's going on for different people. And you're able to pick out different solutions and come up with new methodologies. For example, Beth had this thing where she did a card to meet each and every individual student. I'm sorry, I'm sticking on that. It's one example that Beth can nod her head to and go, yeah. And it was just really fascinating. The next major thing I really enjoyed is all the people were somewhat like me. So the conversations you have out in the middle of the night while you're just sitting around and doing almost nothing, or now the thing, you're still surrounded by these same people that have this same passion. And I thought that that was what was important. And the last part of this is when you walk away from Wakonse, these people can't judge you, because you can take the ideas back. And if you don't execute it exactly the way they said, or you just take parts of it, you don't feel like you've taken away from what they've done, and you don't feel like obligated to follow everything exactly, but you still have 10 new ways of teaching, or 20 or 30. That was my biggest takeaway.
Suzanne, did you have your hand up?
Oh, and it was a lot of fun.
Well, maybe I could do that now. I'm going to share some pictures.
Ooh.
Oh, the pottery thing.
So
I love this picture of Beth, made
Yeah.
to teach.
uh-oh. Oh no.
So I'm going to share some pictures about some of the things that was really cool for me at Wakonse. And it as I described it to everybody, it is a summer camp for adults. We were in the dorms. That was an actual summer camp. We had access to all of the facilities. And we just so happened to have somebody that was there that knew how to do pottery. So there was a small group of us, actually two groups of 2 different days that got to learn how to throw a pot. And it was really fun. It's something that I would never do in my regular life. So that was pretty cool. So here are some of the different groups. When we talk about the
sharing it.
presentation, what?
See them.
Huh? You can't see the picture now?
pictures.
I can see them.
Oh, I see them. Never mind.
Okay.
They were hidden. Sorry.
So the presentations aren't necessarily presentations like you think. It's not like going to a research conference with your PowerPoints and clickety click. It is like we're doing here, a campfire talk where you're getting together and talking about problems of practice or demonstrating something that you do and then riffing off of each other, very jazz-like. So this is just one of the groups that we were talking about things that we do at different campuses, and recognize that it is across universities and it's across disciplines. So this is the session I did. They do have markers and crayons. And so I talked about how to get students to represent their thinking in different ways. And so I introduced ideas about graffiti walls or one pagers. And so we practiced some of them. And as you can see, it's very informal. This is one of the best things about where it is located. It is off Lake Michigan, and it's beautiful. It was a little chilly this past May. I was not expecting that, but it's a really great time for reflection. I went out there a couple of times and just sat and watched and listened to the waves. I did some exercise down there, and then we had a polar plunge because it was actually quite chilly, and a whole bunch of us actually jumped in the water and enjoyed the coolness. This is what it looked like when we were all together. This is the main room, and this is one of the few places that actually did had a projector and slide. Going into it, we all took, I forget what the personality test was called, but it helped us understand ourselves a little bit better. And we had opportunities to kind of like what we do here at K-State as we're a strengths-based campus. It's an assessment like that. And they had people who were, well-versed in this personality assessment to counsel you and talk about how you can use these in your teaching. One day we ended up having a picnic out there. So they had, regular hot dogs, hamburgers, that type of stuff. But it was a good weather that day. It was time for us to meet again in a very informal way. And you can see there's different groups all over the place. And there were some people out on the beach that were eating. And again, informal networking. It was really easy for those of you who are introverts. It was much easier to find a person one-on-one and go off and have that conversation rather than constantly being in large groups. This is another session that, again, people were working in small groups. This was the main hall. Just off of this, there's a patio, and at the evenings, we would gather up there to watch the sunset over Lake Michigan, which was just really chill, well, everybody fought for the comfy seats because there was a whole bunch of the Adirondack chairs that were so comfortable. And here's just me sitting and enjoying the time. So I'm a rule breaker. My colleague Beth, she is a rule follower. That's what makes us really good teacher besties because we complement each other. I didn't go to some of the sessions because you don't have to go to all of them. I went to the canteen where we had dinner, and I sat in front of the fireplace, and I completed a revise and recement and set it off because there was Wi-Fi up there. Because my mind was in that space. I was calm. I was collected. I could think about it, and I had the time and the quietness and away from the dishes and the laundries and the puppy dog that's whining at me and things like that. This was my small group. We were from lots of different places. She was a psychologist. He was the The arts teacher that did the pottery, and then the one you can't quite see, she's from vet med. And so when we came together in our small groups to talk about teaching and learning, we really were cross-disciplinary, which was really interesting to do that comparison. Both in what do you do differently, what can I learn from you, and what do we do similarly. And that's all my pictures. So my big takeaway is the week is a summer camp. There are things to do if you want to do them. There were activities. There were the rock climbing, the ropes course. There were some people that walked into town after everybody else was asleep and had adult beverages and cheered each other.
And fried asparagus.
And fried asparagus. But it really was whatever you needed is what you did. You went to, well, if you were giving a session, you go to the session. That's important. But other than that, if you wanted to skip a session, it was okay. If you wanted to grab somebody and go sit in the chairs and chat, that was okay. If you needed a nap, that was okay. But it really honored who we are as scholars, as teachers, and most importantly, as human beings.
You know, if you're interested in the process and you go to the provost's website, there's a link to it off of the TLC site, the TLC homepage. One of the things in the application process is it asks you, do you have something you'd like to present on? But that's a little bit misleading. I had something I thought, okay, so I filled that out. I filled in the Wakonse application last time I talked. I thought I was going in there to talk about a topic that I had, like Suzanne, like Beth had said, prepared ahead of time. And then when we got there, turn left, nope, totally not. I ended up being put in being asked to do a session on something totally different, and found myself saying things, talking things, realizing that the stuff I was sharing was stuff I had been preparing to share for years and didn't even know it or wouldn't acknowledge it until I got put into that situation. Somebody asked in the chat about inspiration or coming home, and it's so funny coming back from that and realizing this thing that had been inside me that I wanted to talk about and didn't know about until Wakonse brought it out. How do you don't prepare for that, except that in as much as, yeah, we've all been preparing for it. That sounded too mushy. I'm sorry.
No. Okay, so we've talked a little bit. We maybe have wet your whistle. Maybe you have some questions or something you want to know a little bit more about. So this is kind of, we just, we were going to we call this our little campfire chat, right? So like, what do you want to know? What are you curious about? If you wanted to go, what would you like to do? Dawn, I see your hand up. We'll start with you.
So you've talked a little bit about how it's not the usual conference experience, right? And the talk you give is not the way you normally give talks. And I remember when I went there, for a lot of us, there was kind of an adjustment period, right? Where it was just kind of like, wow, this is not what I thought it would be, because it literally is, right, scout camp for teachers. So what can you kind of tell people to help them kind of adjust so they're not kind of resisting? Like there were people the first couple of days wearing suits, right? When we kind of went, right? And it's more a cargo short t-shirt kind of place, right? So it's like, what kind of things would you just to lean into that mindset a little more quickly? Because I think most people in my cohort came around, but there were still people like on that third day saying, what is this thing?
Oh my goodness, that's so funny because like Suzanne will tell you, I was so right there. Now, I didn't have suits with me or anything, right? But I certainly did, like the first day or so, dress very differently than I dressed like later in the week. It really is a very low-key, casual atmosphere. Okay, first of all, it is there, as Suzanne mentioned, it can be very chilly. And so you take layers. It really is like summer camp, like think about summer camp in May, what it would be like off of a lake. Or if you ever go out camping with your families, right, in the spring, or like there can be a chill to the air. And so jeans, shorts, sweatpants, you know, joggers, like all those things. So I lived in, I think I had one hoodie with me, and like I lived in that, like every picture I think that Suzanne took of me almost like has, I'm in that hoodie, right? Because that's all I had. But there was one day that was really, really cold, and I think I had 3 or 4 different layers on under the hoodie, right? Just to try to stay warm. And so I think that adds to the way that this is different, right? Like we usually are, as both Stephen and Suzanne have pointed out, that I'm very organized and detail oriented and whatever, and I'm a rule follower, like, right? Like I'm usually that person that I have that set way and I want to look this certain way. And so I had to let go of all of that and be okay just being in my jeans or my joggers, right? And by like what, day 3, I didn't care. Like I stopped doing my hair, like, like I had a ball cap on, like the first couple of days, like I did my hair, whatever. And I know like one afternoon, several afternoons in, like I remember coming out of the shower and I had blow dried my hair, and I came to dinner and people were like, "Oh my gosh, look at your hair. It looks so good." I'm like, okay, this tells you like what I've looked like the rest of the week, right? If we're talking about hair that I've just blow dried. But it just really is, it's that, yeah, it's that just chill out. Like it is such a um safe, right? Like non-threatening environment. Hippie commune for the modern professor. Oh, I love that. That's cute. Okay, I see Carrie's hand, and I see
Hang on, I want a shot
Yeah.
at answering that too.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Because two of the things I saw that impressed me in terms of leaning into this, because Don's question was about like how do you get into the vibe of this. I'll talk about Stephen. Yeah, I'm pointing at you, Stephen.
That's fine.
Who recognized where his comfort zone was and deliberately went out of it. Every time we sat down to a meal, he deliberately picked a different table and said, "I want to go meet these folks, even though I don't know them," and pushed himself. None of this, "Oh, I'm just going to sit with my people I'm familiar with." He deliberately pushed himself out there. And kind of in the same way, I'm seeing Suzanne, who, everybody's off to their session. And instead, she's lounging in this Adirondack chair and with a crowd of people around her, like some electron shell or something like that, having this high conversation, which, I mean, yeah, that was awesome. I went to Wakonse in 2008, so I can tell you from experience going a second time is different. You pop into you fall into that right away. So I'm not going to tell you don't you're not going to enjoy your first time, but there's value to repeating the experience again.
It was odd. It was hard to lean into. I'm not gonna lie. Suzanne had to really help me get there. Not gonna lie. Okay, Carrie.
As you were talking, Beth, I was thinking about you were talking about preparation, and I've been thinking about well, how can I prepare? So if there isn't a lot of preparation, if for somebody who enjoys sense of preparation, like what kinds of preparation do I need to I don't know, what do I need to do so I feel comfortable at the appropriate level of preparation?
That's a really great question. I obviously was like, I didn't know what I was getting into, right? So I was over prepared. I had a PowerPoint ready for like all of that, and I didn't use any of it. They do recommend, or they did at least when we were there, like that maybe you have a handout that would go along with something that you want to share. And so those handouts, I actually had more conversation spurred from my handouts than I did from like anything that maybe was sparked in a session, right? And so I just had a couple of handouts on some things that like I had recently talked about. One of them was about something I had recently shared in TLC about visible learning, and so I had shared a few strategies that way on the handout. And then some other ways to build relationships with students. Some of the others had I'm trying to remember, there was a couple of lesson plan type things, possibly some resource lists, references and things like that. So it's not, I mean, if you put in there like that you could present on certain things, I would just say just have some key points or key ideas that you would really love for other people to know about that you know, in your back pocket in a sense, right? Or something quick that you could point them to that would help support that. But you're definitely unplugged. And so like it's not something that you're going to need a computer for, or, you know, a projector, you know, like anything like that. It truly is the dialogue, the doing, the talking and problem solving. So even prepare, if you know, one way to prepare would be to go in and think about what are some things I'd like to have other people help me with. You know, like what am I struggling with? Or as I reflect on my teaching, like what areas would I like to improve? And that could even lead towards some of it.
Pat, you had your hand up?
Oh yeah, that's a good thing, Suzanne. Okay.
Hi. First of all, thanks to Rick for calling this to my attention. I actually retired from K-State in 2024. I first went to Wakonse in 2005, and I'm listening to your conversations, and everything you're saying was true then is true now. But I think coming off of a year of teaching scholarship and service in May, none of us want to commit to something that we're not familiar with, but that spirit of Wakonse, that opportunity, that restorative, giving yourself permission to step into that restorative environment and take that spirit of Wakonse home with you is something that really can't be explained until you experience it. And I think for me, the most valuable part of Wakonse was what happened afterwards. There was a time for about 10 years on our campus when easily at least a third of our faculty had been to Wakonse, and we had formed a core group. And we're an interdisciplinary campus at Salina, and we all live in our silos, we do our work, we have tunnel vision, but what we all had in common was teaching. And Wakonse brought that teaching component together, and we would get together for a variety of different things, and we always carried that spirit of Wakonse to those conversations. And out of that grew a whole series of initiatives that have kind of gone away somewhat because of attrition, and people retired, and COVID interrupted it in a huge way. But things like our peer review of teaching program, our annual professional day where we share our scholarship regardless of discipline, some brown bag things, just a whole series of things evolved out of that group of people who had been to Wakonse, who were passionate about their teaching. And there was a spirit of Wakonse that carried through with it. And I'm so thankful that Rick and Adam and Stephen and everybody is kind of trying to come back and bring that spirit back, because it has incredible value in our academic lives.
Pat, I want to, oh, you disappeared from the top. Anyway, Pat, thank you very much for doing the polar plunge, because that image of you having fun at Wakonse was one of my big inspirations. Seeing that image whenever Rick and you and all you guys did a similar presentation. What we're doing now, y'all did that at our campus about, you know, a while back right before you retired. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you talking about your experiences there, and trying to convince us to go, because that was, believe it or not, fairly life-changing.
Thank you. Like I say, nobody is ready to jump into something like that at the end of the semester, but one of the ways of talking people into it is to ask them to give themselves permission to do this, to have this experience, because it is an experience.
Thanks for sharing that, Pat. Melissa, I see your hand.
I have a excuse me, I have a question. So I'm predicting the answer, but I want to ask anyway. Is this a conference that is useful for non-traditional types of teaching outside of the classroom? In other words, someone who's in a supervisory position of students, or who leads professional development, or who teaches basically in any way outside of the classroom. Is it still a valuable conference for that person?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No doubt.
For example, for the presentation me and Beth did, the lady was a supervisor of about 200 grad students that were teaching assistants. And she was trying to figure out some ways to organize it. So there were people at all levels. Since I'm don't have a PhD, I'm not dealing with research and all that. So it's a different thing. So it was really fun talking to people at all levels, grad students that were teaching, full professors that have been at it for 20 years, and people that were in their first and second year of teaching. It was the full gamut. And since I teach a lot of shop classes and applied labs, it was even fun then to see other ways of getting discussions going in those shop classes. So I hope that helps.
I teach
Thank you.
physics, and I can't tell you how many times you get on an airplane and the person beside you says, hi, they introduce themselves. Oh, what do you do? I teach physics. And the conversation just, well, imagine instead being seated at the table and I teach physics and they go, oh, cool. Tell me about that. That's the spirit. So yeah, I mean, even somebody who teaches physics is interesting. And so anybody that came out
You're
from,
interesting, Rick.
yeah, thank you. The conversations thrived on the diversity.
I will say I agree. That was the diversity was absolutely the strength of it, right? Like, and you know, speaking to people from all across the country in all aspects of teaching, whether they were in business or whether they were supervising, you know, like the TAs, and there were even some grad students that were at this this conference with us. I think they're working to have like a sister conference going kind of parallel for grad students, and they were talking about, like, you know, they were even sharing ideas and they were asking questions about for their future, right? And so there was just so much that we walked away, you know, like I think Suzanne and I think we were the only teacher educators there. You know, and so like it was super diverse. And again, that is the beauty of it. There were even some retired instructors there that they're, you know, Wakonse fellows, so to speak, and they just love coming, and so they were there with us. So that was kind of fun.
And
On
some
the
people
day-
talked about in
sorry.
the chat about the importance of networking at conferences. And to go off what Beth said earlier, the networking here is not like handshake, nice suit, I'm going to try to impress you. The networking here is, damn, that is a good idea. Can we do something with that?
On the day we were leaving, or was it the night before, one of the groups, they had come together in the same, they'd flown and they'd rented a vehicle. And as they were leaving, they kind of stopped and said, uh-oh, we have a flat tire. And they called to see if anyone could help. And so there I am. And next thing I know, there's like a whole group around us and we're changing the tire together because guess what? It's a teachable, learnable moment. Why do you put the donut on the back and that kind of stuff? And it never ended.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. How many attendees are there? That's a great question. How many were at ours?
I think it was
Oh,
somewhere
like-
around 55.
What I was saying, yeah, around 60 maybe. But
55, 60,
I
but
don't
it
think
used to
that's a
be
set
bigger and then
number.
it used to
Yeah.
be smaller.
Yeah. COVID, they had, I think, wasn't our year, last year was the first year they'd gotten back together in person since COVID, I think I remember them saying. So they were really trying to build it back up. And
I
so
think the discussions were as before COVID, they got kind of close to 400, and they were trying to scale it back from that because they found that the intimacy got weakened by having so many people, and they were enjoying the actual process of building it back up because it had brought back some of that intimacy. It got to a point where I think I knew just about 80% of the people's names. Don't ask me to do it now, but if I meet them again, I would be like, hey, I know you from somewhere. And then I would remember their name a little bit because, I mean, there was a fantastic variety of people to meet and it was a lot of fun.
It helped to be broken up, like Beth said, into these little discussion groups, almost like little mini families, I guess, where you could share a little bit more and be a little bit more vulnerable. I don't remember the details now, but I remember attending a different uh, breakout session and seeing somebody from my group ask a question and knowing what was behind her question. And then we came back and talked about it later when we had went back to our little discussion group.
Undergrad student, no, there were not undergrad student ambassadors in the discussion group. I don't think there
I
were
had a couple.
undergraduate. Were there undergraduate students there?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I know there were graduate students there. I didn't realize there were undergraduate students there.
Historically, there were, because Joe Johnson used to bring undergrads with him all the time.
Hmm.
I saw a few, I saw several graduate students, but there were also like 5 or 6 people that I didn't know
Mhm.
as far as age, and it was hard to judge. But I mean, I didn't start every conversation with what is your academic title and standing. So,
I know when I did the ropes course, the woman who was essentially my counterweight in case I fell off was an undergraduate, tiny little thing. I'm like, there's no way she weighs enough to hold me down.
I
Yeah,
don't know. There may have been, and I didn't
there
know
was a
that.
blend. There are
Yeah.
people there who had been there multiple times, and that says something when you keep coming back.
Yeah. And I don't know that we talked about this necessarily, but Rick and his crew from Salina, they carpooled up there. They took a van up, stopped halfway through, and then drove on up. Suzanne and her husband are big RVers, and so and they travel all throughout the summer, so they just made this part of their trip. And her husband stayed in a park nearby, and was there. And then I flew to Grand Rapids, and then Suzanne and her husband picked me up there in Grand Rapids. And there were quite a few people that flew into Grand Rapids to get to the conference. I just, if there's a large enough contingency, right, from K-State, be it from Salina and or Manhattan, I think it would be great to do the carpool caravan kind of style, just because of, getting to know each other, traveling that way. And when you think about things that you need at summer camp, it can sometimes be a little difficult to travel with those types of things. Like Suzanne, I was grateful for Suzanne because she took like my pillow and extra blankets and things like that for me that would have been really difficult to have traveled on an airplane with. And so, that's one aspect of being able to drive up there and carpool and hang out together with that. So yeah.
Oh, flashlights. So someone alluded to the after hours activities. There is a pub, tavern, restaurant, I don't know what you would call it,
I forgot the
outside of
name.
camp. And typically every evening, a bunch of us would walk over there. The walk to get there is so dark. When you live in the city, you forget just how dark can be. And then all the while that you're walking there, people are continuing on about how stuff is at their institution. And you can't even, at some point, I didn't even know who was talking. It was just a disembodied voice in the darkness. You just try to keep one foot in front of the other, try to follow the next person's light to get there.
Yep. So any other thoughts or questions really quick before our time is up? Dawn, is there anything else you wanted us to say about this or to share?
Yeah, I mean, what we really kind of wanted, and I think you've definitely hit the mark, is we wanted people to share their authentic experiences for this conference. I think this conference is wonderful. It sounds like all of you have had wonderful experiences too. We'll drop that link back in about that support because conference costs about $1,000, not counting travel and those kinds of things. And the provost office has some, you know, they're a little bit competitive, and we'll basically the provost office pay for about half of it for some people to kind of go and do that. And we hope like departments and colleges and things like that will kick in the balance. But we think that this is something that, that the best go to get better, kind of sort of thing in a lot of different ways. But there's people at all stages of their career. So if this is something that you want to get better at and you want to go and just live teaching for about a week, it's a really amazing experience. And I hope our colleagues have really made you think about this as something you can do this year, next year, or sometime in the future. But yeah, we are about out of time. So if all of you would help me in thanking our wonderful panelists today for talking about their experiences at Wakonse, teaching Scout Camp. We've dropped a post-event survey in the chat for you to complete on this event. Again, we just put that link about where you can find out about applying for a scholarship to kind of help you attend. Next week, Colby Morberg is going to be talking about open educational resources, and I'll remind you that we archive these events on our website. So definitely check this out later or point colleagues to this so they can understand the coolness about Wakonse too. If anyone has any questions, I'll stick around for a minute. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here. See you next week on real time on Wednesday at noon. And have a great rest of your afternoon.